Shabbat Shalom. I'm Rabbi Robert Barr, and I'm pleased that you're joining me and each other for this streaming Shabbat service. It has been a hard and difficult week here in the United States of America. It's been a challenging time around the world because of the pandemic. This is a chance for us to pause, to catch our breath, to remember what is important and essential in our lives. So put away the pencil and the paper, put away the notebook and the keys, set aside the shovel and hammer, rest. For this interval, no buying, no selling, no working, no laboring, no straining, not living in the past, not planning for the future. This is a time for celebration, for joy, for mirth. We are here alive to rejoice in another Sabbath, another opportunity to be together, grateful for our family and our friends. With no distractions, we touch and are touched, the great gift of the Sabbath. Again, I'm Rabbi Robert Barr of Congregation Beth Adam. That's our bricks and mortar congregation here in Greater Cincinnati, and our Jewish community, our online congregation. We've been online for over a decade. We recognize that the internet provided us the opportunity to reach people around the world, to share what we were doing here in Greater Cincinnati. And during this pandemic, when we have been socially distanced from one another, the internet and our streaming services has become far more important. It's allowed us to join together, to sort of push against the isolation we are feeling. And more than that, it's also the voice of Judaism that we give expression to here at our Jewish community in Beth Adam. It's a bold, dynamic Judaism, a Judaism that, while it can appreciate the past, recognize that our responsibility is for the present and more so to the future, that we need to take the best information that we have and integrate it into the Jewish experience. Our ancestors created a Judaism and a liturgy services that reflected who they were. We have the right and the responsibility to create a Judaism that's reflective of who we are, our understanding of our place in the world, in the universe. That's what we've been doing here, and I'm glad you're a part of it. Now, I know many of you are watching at 6 o'clock Eastern time. That's when our services are posted, and many can't. Whenever you're participating, you're part of our community. And you can chat, you can leave us messages, and know that I read them. I really do appreciate them. And when you chat, please be welcoming and inclusive, and let us know where you are participating from. Now we continue our service with the lighting of the Shabbat candles. On this Shabbat, we create our moment in time. We pause to reflect upon our yesterdays and tomorrows, to renew our ties with our families and friends, to restore our energies, to refresh our spirits. As the sun descends and shadows lengthen, the direction of the day gives way to the stillness of night. It's time for us to see not with our eyes, but with our hearts and minds. As the day gives way to evening, it's time for us to welcome the Shabbat. The candles stand before us, waiting to be lit. We recall our ancestors as we too seek to dispel the darkness and banish the cold, to bring glowing softness, warmth, and safety into our homes. May the dancing flames of these candles kindle warmth within our hearts, wisdom in our minds, passion in our spirit souls. Baruch ha'or ba'olam, blessed is the light within the world. Baruch ha'or ba'adam, blessed is the light within each person. Baruch ha'or ba'Shabbat, blessed is the light of the Sabbath. Rabbi Burstein and I had a conversation yesterday about the events in Washington, D.C. Our feelings, our responses, not political, but our emotional, visceral reaction to what we have seen. It goes without saying that we witnessed something on Wednesday that we have never seen. Our Capitol desecrated. People literally stormed the building. and took it over, and the representatives and senators had a shelter as well as their staff. And tonight, we're not going to get into the politics of it, but I know that so many people are feeling this, and there's so many emotions. I thought that you, David, and I, we could talk about our feelings, our sense of the experience. And I know you've talked to people, and I've talked to people. So how are you feeling when you watched what was going on? What were your immediate reactions?
I was feeling like, I just turned off CNN for watching it all the time, and now I'm back like in it. I was really saddened, scared, and really kind of felt kind of like off kilter, which is kind of what people have talked to me about too, is this sense of it's beyond politics. It's this desecration of not only a physical space, but of a concept. Mm-hmm. The danger that it presents in the conceptual ideas to that our country is built on a social contract. A lot of it, like the trust that we have for each other, that we're going to have a social contract. And I felt like that was violated. I mean, it felt like a violation to me.
I think it's interesting. That word violation, to me, it was about desecration. To me, as rabbis, we work in sacred spaces. We work in a sanctuary. We take out a Torah. I mean, there's this, and well, it feels like, in some ways, I think the Capitol is America's sacred space. I don't know how else to describe it. And it felt like it was being violated. It was being desecrated in a way that was incredibly disturbing about what it represents. I'm not a big into symbols all the time, but this is such a significant symbol to see someone hitting, using a crowbar to break the doors. It felt like part of America was being destroyed.
I think it's, I think it's such a, just playing off the symbol idea, it's such a recognizable symbol. Like, you can show that building to most people around the world and they know what it is. I mean, it's kind of like, you know what the White House is, Lincoln Memorial, Washington Monument, like those things. But the Capitol itself is such a physical presence in D.C. I mean, it's huge.
Right.
And it represents something. It represents different parties within our country working together to hold democracy. I mean, it really is one of the branches, like the three pieces that hold this piece together. And the fact that it was violated or desecrated, or that people went in there without that sanctity that you would hope someone would feel.
Right.
When you enter that building, I mean, you've talked to me that you've been there a lot of times. I've been there a couple times, and like there's a sanctity to it because it's where history has happened, like where the social contract of democracy has been held together. And there's been divisiveness there sometimes. There's been challenges to the country, but it never, ever felt out of control like that.
Right.
And I think that lack of control, that kind of mob mentality, that people entering into a space without really understanding what it is, maybe not even understanding what the idea of democracy is, but like that's another conversation. But I think it is that idea of desecration.
Right. And what was what was disturbing, dissident, was the clash of symbols. So, there at one point I saw someone carrying a Confederate flag into the capital of the United States. And, I think about, we fought a civil war against between the North and the South. It divided our country. That war was eventually, with Lincoln, the North won. Slowly the North and South was knitted together. That flag represented, those who fought technically against America, and now to see it being carried in to the Capitol, it was the dissidence and the clash of history was so upsetting to me when I saw that.
Right, and the imagery of that, what the flag represents to a large proportion of our community, people of color, people of different ethnicities, and the racist connotations. I mean, we've been struggling with this all along, and the fact that it was paraded like uninterrupted into the Capitol building, and
Right.
it was paraded around. I love what you said about symbols, because I mean, I was looking at the flags that people were hanging outside, whether it's an upside down American flag, the term patriot is being thrown around, like patriotic or patriot or revolutionary. These are words that we use against the British. Like,
Right.
this is against a standing oppressive government or oppressive regime. And that scares me, because whatever our differences are, I don't feel that
Right.
this is an oppressive regime. But I think people felt emboldened, empowered to desecrate. So it's interesting, desecrate it physically, obviously they destroyed
Right.
things, but desecrate it symbolically.
Mm-hmm.
Someone with their feet up on the desk of Nancy Pelosi's, like, you
Right.
and I
I wouldn't
wouldn't
want.
be able to get close to that. By the way, like, we
Hmm?
wouldn't be able to get close to that space. Like,
Well, I mean, if I walked into my own office and saw someone treating it that way, I mean, I was raised that there are certain places you act a certain way. So
Right.
there was that. There was the clearly, what became painfully evident is there's sort of this great divide right now that exists in our nation. This that there's a group that would act this way. What does it mean for our future? I think that's what many people are fearful of. Is this the beginning of something? Is this the continuation of something? Is it the beginning, the end of? Are we going to find a way to come back together as a nation? Because at some point, the fabric of a nation, when it's pulled, it will rip.
Right.
It can't fray.
Well, it's interesting. You asked me how I was feeling, and I think that's a piece of what I was feeling of, like, is this the beginning? Is this the end? Is this a culmination of 5 years of just saying, it's not that bad, it's not that bad, it's not that bad? I think it has potential for either one, and I think that edge of it is really hard. I mean, obviously, the fabric of our country is ripped. It is divisive. There is 2 different countries or 3 different countries, whatever you want to say, and there also is potential for great healing. The fact that there's going to be an inauguration in that spot in 13 days, 12 days. It's like
Right.
a horrible advent calendar.
20th, 20th.
Yeah, and there's going to be a symbolic nature to that too, that the country's going to come together to name a new president in 12 days in the exact spot where we all see this image of. I honestly, when I turned it on, even though I knew stuff was going on, I thought I was looking at another country. Like,
Right.
it took me a second to, like, I'm like, is that the Capitol? Like, is that, like, our country, DC? Is that happening here? And I think that democracy's fragile. Like, and I think that is the whole fabric. It's been getting frayed for a while,
Right.
and it leaves spaces for people to do really the wrong thing or do the right thing. Like, so that's the hope that I feel, is that this is now, our backs are to the wall right now. Like, this isn't, either we go way astray or we say we're not going to do this anymore. And
it's not about, this was not a protest, because the Capitol is used to protests. There are protests when I was in DC. There are protests around the Capitol on a regular basis. This was not a protest. This was an insurrection.
Yeah.
This was something of a totally different nature, and that our elected officials, as well as their staff. I think this is the other, because I know some staff, and I was actually texting to make sure, asking if people were safe, where they were, how they got, and that people were worried about their lives.
yeah,
And that is painful. I happened to hear one elected representative say that she called her husband to let her husband know where her will was.
right.
And you sit there and you go, this is America. We elect our officials. Obviously, I do not agree with every elected official. I don't agree with their votes. I don't agree. But I want none of them physically harmed, because to do that, it changes the entire nature of what our nation is supposed to be. And to think that there are people that they were fearful for their lives being in the people's house is so painful and such a sadness and a stain on our nation. mean, I believe this day is going to go down in history as a day in infamy, as we talk about. We refer to Pearl Harbor, but this was a day created by our own citizens. This wasn't some external. These weren't enemies. These weren't external forces. This was not a natural disaster. These were people who claimed to be committed to this country, doing something that is abhorrent.
Right. And, it's interesting, the People's House. I mean, I was watching the news and they were interviewing someone and he said, well, this is the People's House. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't go into the house and you trash it. Like, that's not being a good guest in someone's house, even if it's your house.
Right.
Like, you go in with the respect. You go in and recognize you have the First Amendment right to protest and to have free speech and to wear whatever shirt you want to wear, fly whatever flag you want outside the Capitol building. But this is where people work. And this is no different than like a workplace shooting, or like, it's no different than that. It's a violent act of entering a building, not wanting to have discourse, but wanting to cause harm. And, I'm interested to see how it plays out on social media and other places. I mean, like, for better or worse, there's about 1 million pictures of these people.
Right. Well, that's a whole. I mean, the whole
other thing. But
between how they've been treated and the Black Lives Matter protesters treated, and President-elect Biden referenced that. Multiple people have talked about that. Right. But before I forget, I do want to mention some other symbols. You mentioned T-shirts, and there were some clearly anti-Semitic T-shirts that were rolled into this. Whether it was, I saw one that read Camp Auschwitz. Another one would it's W6.
Oh yeah.
I've seen this.
Wasn't enough.
6 million one, and it's rolled in with the Confederate flag and with the American flag simultaneously. I mean, the messages that were being broadcast across our nation and around the world were stunning in its anger, the conflict. I mean, you have younger kids. How did they respond? This is their country. Do they understand it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, the last 4 or 5 years has been really hard for me as a parent with my kids about our country. They're much more politically active than I was, or like politically curious. They sat up all night on the night of election to understand. They know more about the voting in Georgia and Pennsylvania and what counties were being counted. And I think they were like, what's going on? And as a parent, it's so hard, and I spoke to our parents last night. I called the parents and I said, like, there's really nothing you can say. I mean, this is in real time. Like, this isn't a history lesson that we're learning about. We're like, literally, you said a day in infamy. We're living history. Right. Like, one after the other. And look, there were some things that happened yesterday that were also interesting. The state of Georgia, the Senate going to again, not politically, but just interesting as far as, and there were 3,600 people that died of COVID. Like, it's, all this stuff's going on. So I think they're feeling this sense of, where is the stable place in our lives? Like, where is government has always, whether you agree with it or not, has had stable rules of engagement and symbols that are sacred. And yesterday, it'd be like being in a plane. It broke the fourth wall. Like, the whole play comes in your face, and I think that's what it felt like to me and to my kids.
That's interesting, because I was talking to some older members of the congregation who said it felt like this 1968, which would have been the killing of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Robert Kennedy, on the heels of Detroit riots had taken place in '67, and other riots, the killing of Kennedy, John Kennedy being killed in the early '60s, and the sense of just a sense that the country felt like it was coming apart. And some people said it felt like that again. They said there have been rough patches in between, but that real sense of sorrow. And I think too, and it's important to say we've all been living in an incredibly tense time. We've been living through COVID. I mean, the fact is, 9 or 10 months, we've been socially distancing. We've been struggling with it. The vaccine came out, and maybe we're beginning to say, well, maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Parents are working with their kids at home because people are working from home. The kids aren't going to school because of COVID. I mean, the pressure has been great. We had a contentious election, which added to that sense of pressure. Georgia, the election didn't end. It kept on going and going and going, and what the outcome was. And then this added to it. I mean, I think people are overwhelmed. I was on a couple of meetings today, and I think people are just overwhelmed, exhausted, anxious, nervous. They want a calm port in the storm, and in government, the hope is government will often provide that. And it felt like the seams were coming apart, and there is no place to just catch our breath and pause.
I love that image of a port in a storm. You know, like it just has been tumultuous. These seas have been tumultuous,
right? And
the ability to kind of find space. And I'm interested to you as a rabbi, like, how do you like create that space for people right now? I mean, because again, like, all of our markers have been taken away, right? Like you would say we could gather in the sanctuary, or we could gather at the temple, and we could have a dinner together, and we could be together. We could go and see people in their homes. But all of that's been removed also. So, right. I mean, I'm interested into like what you think about that.
No, I think that's profound, because I was talking to somebody so we're recording this on Thursday. This was Wednesday. It was yesterday. I was talking to someone last night, and they said, you know, in any other situation, I would have gone and been with friends to try to cope and understand what was going on, but I'm by myself. Yeah. So I think that too. I mean, and this is our conversation right now as part of our service. And I'm hoping that the service provides a bit of continuity, a sense of connectedness, a chance for us all to pause and catch our breath. You know, we intentionally, you and I, decided not to talk about the politics of all this, but more of the process and give voice to what we're feeling, and I think what other people are feeling. So my hope is that all of us who are here, whether you're participating, online in real time, or you're watching in our archives, you're part of a community of people who care about each other. And we need to find a way to be able to help our country heal, because we're not just witnesses to this, we're also participants in the history of our country. Right. And one of the conversations that I want to have is, what is the appropriate response? How do we find a way to move beyond this? Because it would be easy just to wallow in this and just be angry and frustrated, which are all appropriate, and I have those feelings. But we also have a responsibility as citizens to figure out how to help heal our nation. I don't want to be Pollyannish. I think it would be easy to be Pollyannish right now. I think to say, oh, it's darkest before the dawn. Maybe, I hope, but I really think we have to process a little bit before we decide exactly what's happening or define it. But I think community still is important, and I'm glad you were willing. You know, we had our different conversation. We're recording a second time. We felt this was so important to give voice to it. But that's part of being a community. Sometimes it's just giving voice to our frustration, our angers, and our fears, and knowing that we're not alone.
Right, and that you're not alone in what you're feeling. I mean. Right. This has been a universal experience. Obviously we're all over the world, and people from other countries too. But within our country, the United States, this is a universal experience. This is our capital. This is our center of democracy. And I think I think we're all a little bit shaken. And I think the ability to come together, it's something that we've done. I mean, it's interesting that people have compared COVID and 9/11, and it never really kind of went with me, because it's a long-term thing. That's exactly how I feel right now, is that feeling I had around 9/11, where I'm not in DC, I'm not at the Capitol building, I wasn't under threat, but I felt this intense discomfort. And we reacted, we were resilient during that time in a way that I'll always remember. Right. And that's my hope, is that we're able to pull together and inaugurate a new president and work on healing and work on seeing that there's lots of people that disagree, and there's ways of doing it, and just to be hopeful about that. But I am shaken, there's no question.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we were able to share this time. I hope our conversation, those who are participating with us, it opened up and allowed you to give voice or hear our voices talk about feelings, because we all have them. And it's important to share them. And it's important that we're part of a community together that are resilient. So, David, thank you. Be safe.
Thank you.
And
You too.
we continue our service in a moment. The conversation that Rabbi Burstein and I had was our initial response. We were responding to what we saw, our visceral reaction to those images that we saw on the screen. Clearly, it wasn't meant to be a synopsis of the entire event, nor dive into the deep political issues that our nation is facing, but a personal response, giving voice to the feelings that we have, and I'm sure many of you have as well, and how we can come together as a community and find strength being with one another. So we're going to continue our service with our virtual challah and sharing of wine. Sharing the challah virtually as a symbol, an expression of the fact that we long to be together, to be connected once more, to be able to sit at the table, not anxious about who's near us, knowing that we can sit safely and comfortably. So if you have some bread or a cracker, join with me as the fingers of the challah intertwine. So do we join hands in our common humanity, sharing the fruits of our labors. We cherish that which has been created through human effort. For it's through the work of our hands, the strength of the human spirit, the vision of our minds, that our dreams are woven into the tapestry of time. We celebrate the accomplishments of yesterday and today, anticipating the possibilities of tomorrow. May the sharing of the challah strengthen our bonds with others who walk upon this earth. Baruch Hamal Kapenu, blessed is the work of our hands. Baruch Hazon Ha'adam, blessed is the vision of our minds. Baruch Lechem Ha'aretz, blessed is the bread of the earth. And then if you have some juice or wine, join with me. We celebrate the fruit of the vine, the bounty of nature as we lift the cup. For we're part of nature, which gave us birth and continues to sustain us. Even as we depend upon nature, so do we influence its course. So the search for understanding, we've gained the knowledge to shape our world. Guided by the best of human wisdom and the compassion of our spirit, we accept the responsibility which rests upon us. May the taste of this wine upon our lips stir within us a reverence for nature and a respect for human endeavor. Bruchim chachayim ba'olam, blessed is the life within the world. Bruchim chachayim ba'adam, blessed is the life within each person. And we say, l'chaim, to life. Those of you who have joined us in prior services know that we have once a month a memorial service where we read the names of deceased loved ones. Members of our congregation, we have their memorial names. Those of you who are joining us online, please feel free to send me the names that you hold in your hearts that you would like me to read next week. Send me those names to rabbi@bethadam.org, rabbi@bethadam.org. If you could please do it by Wednesday and include in the subject memorial name, that will help me sort through my emails. Also, feel free to go to bethadam.org. That is our website. And there you can listen to my weekly podcast and see other materials we posted. Perhaps you want to explore the whole area of social justice that is on our website. There are conversations about racism in America. There's conversations about climate change and church state. So you could take a look and explore that as well. I'm glad that you were able to join me and Rabbi Burstein tonight and one another. We are living in challenging times. And I hope that by coming together, by pausing, by knowing that we are part of something larger than ourselves, that it helps to relieve some of the anxiety and anxiousness we may be feeling. We conclude with the words we conclude with each week. May we know blessings those who are near. May we know blessings those who are far. May the Sabbath bring its goodness to everyone soon, wherever they are. Shabbat Shalom.